Hello everyone, this is Varsha and welcome to Programming Knowledge. So in this tutorial, we will understand about the XPath. We will understand what is XPath, how to locate the element using the XPath. We will also understand about the CHROPATH plugin, the types of XPath, what are their syntax. Then we will understand the difference between the absolute and the relative XPath. And out of the absolute and relative XPath, which one is preferred and why. So let's get started. First, let us understand what is XPath. Now, as I said, it is a part of a locator. Here you can see this chart, right? We have the different types of locators as I discussed in the previous tutorial. I discussed about the ID, name, link text, the partial link text, the tag name, the class name, and then the CSS selector. We are left with XPath. Now, there are different types of XPath like the relative XPath and the absolute XPath, and it comes under the customized locators. As I discussed in the previous tutorial, locators are the way to find an HTML element on a web page. XPath is used when we don't have the ID, the name, the tag name locators present in the HTML. That is when we use XPath. Like here you can see, in Selenium automation, if the elements are not found by the general locators like the ID, class, name, or the link text, the partial link text, the tag name, etc., then the XPath is used to find an element on the web page. XPath is also defined as the XML path. The shortcut, the short name of XPath is the XML path. Now, XPath is basically a syntax or a language for finding any element on the web page using the XML path expression. As I said, XML path is defined as the XML path, right? To find any element, we use the XML path expression. Now this XPath is the address of element using the HTML DOM structure. By using the HTML DOM structure, we will find the XML path expression. Now what is this HTML DOM structure? Now here you can see we have the normal HTML code that we write. Usually we have the HTML head, title, body, and we close the HTML tag. This is the normal HTML code that we usually write. But when a web page is loaded, the browser automatically creates a DOM structure, that is the document object model. Here you can see this is the DOM model. Like we have the document, we have the HTML tag, that is the root element, then we have the head, we have the title, we have the body. Under body we have the different types of elements. So this is the DOM model, that is the DOM structure. Why it is called as a DOM structure? Because the browser automatically creates a DOM structure, that is the nodes, that is the different nodes are created automatically. Over here you can see we have the HTML head, title is just simply written over here. But over here we have the nodes, there are nodes present over here. So that is the reason why it is called the HTML DOM structure, and it is created automatically by the browser. DOM is basically an API interface that is provided by the browser. Now see, if we go detailing into the DOM structure, it's a very huge concept, but for now to understand that the XPath, the XML expression that we will derive from the HTML DOM structure. You know, this structure that we have, we will derive from this. For example, so this is the web page. Now if I want to inspect any of the element, I'll simply click on inspect, and here you see this is the DOM structure of a web page. Like we have the HTML head, body, the HTML tag is closed. Inside head we have different types of meta property, we have the style, we have the script. So all these are in the form of the HTML DOM structure. Okay. So when a web page is loaded, the browser automatically creates this DOM object, and this DOM is an API interface that is provided by the browser. Okay. Next, let us see how can we capture the XPath. Now this is the page that we want to inspect. Now suppose this is the email address field we have, and we want to inspect this element. So I'll simply click on inspect, and here you can see this text box is highlighted, right? Now I want to capture the XPath of this text box. How am I going to do that? I will simply, this syntax, I will simply right click over here, go to copy, and I will click on copy full XPath. See, here I have two options. I have copy XPath and I have copy full XPath. So I will use copy full XPath. There is a difference between the two. We will understand that later. But for now, let's click on copy full XPath. I'll paste it over here. Okay. So here you see, this is the complete XPath that we are having for this field. That is the email address. How is it? First we have the HTML, then we have the body, then we have the different div tags that we have over here, and the last we have the input. Because we want to access this element, we have the input tag over here. Now here you can see these numbers 1, 2, 1. These are the index numbers that is present over here. Okay, these are the index number that is given over here. That is the first element of div. Under the first element of div, I am selecting the second div. Under the second div, I am selecting the first div. As you can see, there are different divs over here. So through these, by accessing these divs, I have reached to input tag, and over here I am accessing the email address, that is this field. Okay, so this is how we can access. So this is the first method of accessing the XPath. The second method that we have is the CHROPATH plugin. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll simply go to Google and type CHROPATH plugin. The very first link that we have, I'll give the link in the description box. Just simply click add to Chrome, add extension, and it is added. Okay, now here you can see there is no option over here of CHROPATH. But now let me refresh this page. I'll just close this browser, and here you can see we have the option CHROPATH. Because we have added the extension to the Chrome browser, so we can see this option CHROPATH. Okay, now I inspected this element. This element I have inspected. So let's see the CHROPATH. And here it is. So here you can see this CHROPATH, right? We have the relative XPath. Now, as I said, the XPath are of two types. That is the relative XPath and the absolute XPath. Then the CSS selector, we have the hash ID. The hash is used for ID, right? Sorry. The CSS selector that we have is the hash email. Now, hash is used when we are accessing the ID. Over here, the ID that we have is email. Here, if you can see, it's email. Here it is. It's email. Okay. Next, the absolute XPath. This is the absolute XPath that we are having. And the tag name that we are using, that is the input. Here you can see the CHROPATH is basically used to find the XPath of any element. And it is mostly used because it is used to find the element more precisely. Like suppose if I will copy this, and here you can see the difference. This XPath is different from this XPath. Why? Because we are indicating index number for each and every div that we have. Here you can see there is no index number for this 3 divs, but over here we have the index number given over here. Why? Because CHROPATH plugin is used to find the element more accurately. Okay, that is the reason why we use CHROPATH plugin. There were previous plugins also that were used, that is the Firebug plugin, the Firepath plugin, but they are outdated. Mostly CHROPATH plugin is used by the companies. And the second most reason is that here you can see we have the relative XPath, the CSS selector that it is selecting, the tag name that it is using. So all these things are present over here. It is showing these things. So whereas over here, if you can just simply copy full XPath, and that's the option over here. So that is the reason why we use the CHROPATH plugin. Okay, now this is one thing. So the next thing that I want to explain is that suppose you have any of a XPath, suppose this is the XPath that you have, and you want to find the XPath, this XPath is of which element. So what you're going to do is, I'll simply copy this. I will click on this source code, Control F. Here you can see find by string, selector or XPath. I will place my XPath over here, and here you can see, here it is. I'm placing my password field over here. This XPath indicates the password field that I have. So this is how also you can find the element through the XPath. And by using CHROPATH, we are finding the XPath, that is the absolute XPath and the relative XPath as well. Okay, so now you have got an idea of how to capture the XPath. This is a small example of it, which is very easier form. Now suppose this is the HTML syntax that I have for the username, password and login button. Now if I want to access my login button through XPath, if I want to click on this login button through my XPath, so how am I going to capture the XPath of this login button? The very first thing that we have is the /. This / is very important. It is used to access the element. Okay. / and then first I'm accessing the HTML. Again a /, then I'm accessing the body tag. Again a /, then I'm accessing the form tag. Again a /, and then I'm accessing the input type, that is the index 3, that is 1, 2, 3. The third input tag that I want to access, because I want to click on the login button, right? Here you can see the syntax. It's input type submit, name submit, and the value is login. This is the login button that we are having for this, and I want to access this login button. I want to click on this login button. For that, the XPath that we're going to use is this one. Over here, the 3 indicates the index number. That is the third input type. That is the third input tag name I want to access. So this is how you will write your XPath. So next, now let us understand the different types of XPath. That is the relative XPath and the absolute XPath. There are 2 types of XPath, relative and absolute XPath. Let's see the absolute XPath. Now the absolute XPath, it contains the complete path from the root element to the desired element. Okay. For example, here you can see my root element is HTML and my desired element is this, that is the input type submit, name submit, value login. This is my desired. Okay. So I have to for absolute XPath, I have to access from root element to the desired element. That's what I'm doing over here. I'm writing a /, that is only one /. Then I'm accessing HTML, again a /, then I'm accessing body, again a /, I'm accessing form. Then in form tag, I want to access the third input tag. How I will write my XML path. Okay, this is the XML path expression that I discussed before. Next, it says that it starts with a single slash. Here you can see it is started with a single slash over here from root element to the desired element. Next, let us discuss its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of absolute XPath is that it identifies the element very faster. Now obviously over here you're writing the complete path. Like we are writing /HTML /body /form /input, the third index. We are writing the complete path. Because of this, it is accessing the element very faster. Okay, that is the advantage of absolute XPath. Whereas the disadvantage, now for this we'll take up an example so that it will be easier for you. So this is the page that you have, that is the username and password and the login page that you have. For that you have written the HTML syntax, right? Now what if the developer wants to make some changes on this page? It wants to, suppose the developer wants to enter another field of email. So here it is, username, password, email. I have written another syntax over here, that is the input ID, email, type, text. Okay, so the developer has entered another text field over here of email. And I have to access the login, and I had written the XPath before this one, right? This is the XPath that I had written before. So is it possible to access the login now after making these changes? No, right? This was the previous XPath that I had written for the login button. For that, this was the syntax. I am accessing the third element of input. That is the login, right? Over here, I am accessing the third element of input, which is the email ID, right? It is the email ID that is present over here. So this is the biggest disadvantage of absolute XPath. That is, if there are any changes that is made by the developers in the path of the element, then our written XPath will no longer work. As you saw in that example, I had written the XPath for the login, but when the changes were made by the developers, the XPath did not work for the login button, because at that place the third element of input tag was the email ID. Okay, so this is the advantages of the absolute XPath. So now let's discuss about the relative XPath. Now a relative XPath is the one where the path starts from the middle of the HTML DOM structure of your choice. Here there is no root node, there is no desired node. You can simply start the path where you want to, of your choice, wherever you want to start. So basically it means that it can search for the element anywhere on the web page. Okay, and it starts with a double slash, whereas the absolute XPath starts with a single slash. It has a syntax, and this is the basic syntax of the relative XPath. First we have the double slashes, then we have the tag name. This tag name can be div, image, input, etc., anything. Okay, then we will open the brackets, and then we have the @. This @ is used to select an attribute. We will write the attribute name, and we will write the value of this attribute. Okay, for example, I have written first the two forward slashes I need, the double forward slashes. Then I need input, that is the tag name. I'll open my brackets. @ the attribute that I'm using is ID, and the value of this attribute is email. So this is the basic syntax of XML, that is the relative XML, and this is most frequently used as compared to the absolute XML. Why? We will discuss that later. So the advantages of relative XPath. The first advantage is that you don't need to mention the long XPath. The long XPath, that is the absolute XPath, is from the root element to the desired element, right? So over here you don't need to mention this long XPath, because there is no need to start from the root element. You can start middle, the path can start from the middle of the HTML DOM structure, that is of your choice. But the disadvantage is that it will take more time in identifying the element, as we are specifying the partial path and not the exact path. Whereas in absolute XPath, we are specifying the exact path of the element. Over here we are specifying the partial path of the elements. So that is the reason why it takes time in processing. So here we have some of the examples of the relative XPath. Like first you can see I have the two double slashes. The tag name that I have used is A. Then this is the @ sign. The attribute is href, and the value of the attribute that I have given over here. Next I have the two double slashes, and I have used the image, that is the img tag name. Then I have the @ sign, and the attribute that I am using is alt, and the value of this is flower. So these are some of the examples. Now if you want to access XPath with multiple attributes, what if we have multiple attributes? Like suppose there might be a syntax where the name value, the value of the name is similar. So what we'll do is we'll use multiple attributes. We'll use ID with that, because ID is never same. It is not the same for every element. It is different. ID is unique, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ID, that is over here is name, and also the name attribute, that is the name value. So by using these multiple attributes value, I can access the element more properly, right? So the syntax of this is tag name, the two double slashes, tag name, open bracket @ attribute 1 is equal to value 1, and then the attribute 2, the value 2. Similarly, like attribute 3, value 3. So you can go on as you wish. Okay, so this is a way of accessing multiple attributes in relative XPath. So now let's study the difference between the absolute XPath and the relative XPath. Now the absolute XPath, it contains the complete path from the root element to the desired element. As we studied, from the root element, that is the HTML, and the desired element that we wanted, that is the login button, we have the input tag, right? The input third index. So it contains the complete path from the root element to the desired element. Whereas the relative XPath, is the one where the path starts from the middle of the HTML DOM structure of your choice. You can start from your choice. Okay. It starts with a single /, whereas over here in relative it starts with a double /. In absolute XPath, not used more often because it selects element from the root node. Whereas the relative XPath is used very often because it searches the element everywhere at the web page. Okay. Next we have in absolute XPath, there is no attribute value. Over here the syntax that I had shown before. Like this is the syntax of the XPath. Here we have the attribute value, right? We are using the value of the attribute and the attribute name. Whereas in absolute XPath, there is no such case. There is no attribute value. In relative, we use the attribute and the value of it. This is the basic example of the absolute XPath, and this is the example of the relative XPath. So this is the difference between the absolute XPath and the relative XPath. So we know XPath are of two types, but which one is mostly preferred? Obviously, the relative XPath is mostly preferred. Why? Because if the application is not very stable, like if the application is not stable and all the attributes are not stable, so we cannot use the absolute XPath. Why? Because the developer might make changes frequently, right? It's not stable, so the developer will make changes, the XPath will keep on changing. So that is the reason why absolute XPath is not mostly used by the automation testers, whereas the relative XPath is mostly used by the automation testers. Because in relative XPath, the attributes used are fixed. They are not changing. We are not using the root element to the desired element. Okay. So that is the reason why we use the relative XPath and not the absolute XPath. So this is all we studied in this tutorial. We studied about what is XPath, about the CHROPATH plugin. We studied the difference between the absolute XPath, the relative XPath, and which one is preferred. So in the next tutorial, we will learn about the functions of the XPath.